Hey you guys, welcome back to another week of What's for Dinner here on my channel. I had planned to show you guys 5 different dinners, 5 different recipes this week in conjunction with the budget grocery haul that I did last week, where I spent just $60 on groceries for my family for the week, and along with a few other items that we had on hand, planned to make 5 meals. But unfortunately, whenever we got to the end of the week, I decided not to make that 5th recipe because we had so many leftovers and my husband really wanted to just kind of eat stacky things since it was Saturday and we were watching football. So please forgive me that I do not have that 5th recipe to show you guys. I just have 4 this week, but hopefully you will find something that you like among these meals that we ate this week. We're starting off this week with a tried and true favorite that everybody in the family likes. This is a 1-pan cheesy turkey smoked sausage and pasta recipe, and these are the ingredients that you see here. Just calls for some olive oil, some minced garlic, an onion, some milk, some cheddar cheese or any kind of cheese that you like, some turkey sausage, some tomatoes, some chicken broth, and some penne pasta. And I realized that I had forgotten to get out the red pepper flakes, so I went and grabbed those from the spice cabinet. You start by chopping up your onions and your turkey smoked sausage. It only calls for 1/4 of an onion. I wanted to go ahead and chop this whole onion up because I'm using it in other recipes this week. And y'all, I tried this chopper that I got from Aldi and it was horrible. I could not make it work properly for me. And I ended up just having to chop it by hand. It took me way longer to try to figure out how to use this thing and make it work than it did just to chop it by hand. So I will probably not be using that again. But you start this recipe out by sauteing the onion and the turkey smoked sausage in a little bit of olive oil. And again, I just used about 1/4 of the onion that you saw there chopped up. And when the onion starts to get translucent is when you add the garlic. I buy mine already minced in the jar. And after that is done browning a little bit, kind of heated through, I went ahead and added my red pepper flakes. I only use a small shake of these because the full amount it calls for in the recipe makes it too spicy. Then I added 2 cups of chicken broth and 1/2 cup of milk and 8 ounces of dry pasta and a can of diced tomatoes. I like to buy the ones that are already seasoned with basil, oregano, or garlic. Also, the fire roasted tomatoes are good in this as well. And you don't have to cook your pasta ahead of time because you have all the moisture you need in that pot to cook it. And now I'm just going to kind of stir that up. I'm going to pop the lid back on and bring it to a slow boil and let it simmer then. Turn the heat down and let it simmer until the pasta is cooked through. It usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes depending on the heat on your stove. I usually check on mine after 10 minutes and it usually needs a few minutes more. When that is done cooking, it looks pretty good right here, I'm going to add some shredded cheese. You can use however much you want. I used about 2 cups. And once I stir that up, it is ready to go. And doesn't that look good? It's so good. It comes together really quickly and only uses 1 pot. Everybody likes this, including all 3 of my children, so it's definitely a go-to for us. I made some Brussels sprouts to go along with this for me. I just tossed these in some olive oil and some salt and pepper and Parmesan cheese and roasted them in the oven. And here is what it looks like all plated up. I did go ahead and half the Brussels sprouts and I quartered the larger ones too before I roasted them in the oven, and they turned out really great. I like Brussels sprouts a lot. I did not make the kids eat them though, so they got grapes instead and a little piece of toast from the small amount of the homemade loaf that I had left over from last week. Okay guys, it's Tuesday and I just got dinner put in the Crockpot for tonight. This is the pesto chicken recipe that I told you I saw on another channel. I will link it here. The name of the channel is Mrs. Dickinson 1910, and I just really wanted to try this. So I have some chicken breasts in the bottom, and I topped it with 1 jar of this pesto sauce. I did find this at Aldi. I was surprised they had it, but they did. A little bit of minced garlic, which I buy already minced, 1/2 stick of butter, and 4 ounces of cream cheese, and I'm going to cook that on low for 8 hours, and then I'll come back and shred that up whenever I get home. Okay, this smelled delicious when I walked in the door, and it was done. So I took all of the chicken out and shredded it up, and I set a little aside because I put an extra chicken breast in here and cooked it so that I can make a pizza with that later this week, but I'm going to put this back in here. I did kind of stir up the cream cheese and stuff into the juices that are in there, and then I added 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. And so I'll put the chicken back in, and I also have 8 ounces of pasta, which I cooked. And so I'll just combine all of that back into the crock pot. and put it on high for a few minutes, probably about 15 minutes or so until it's heated through. Now this calls for additional cheese like mozzarella cheese or Italian cheese, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of that on everybody's plate because I feel like this is rich enough without that extra cheese. But I'm going to put all this back in the crock pot and stir it up, and I'll show you what it looks like when we eat. Okay, here's what it looks like. This is a serving of the pasta, and I put just a little sprinkle of cheese on it. Like I said, I decided to add the cheese to everybody's plate because I didn't think that it would need all the cheese that the recipe called for us. And then we're just having this with a side of broccoli. And yeah, that's what we're having tonight. That's what's for dinner, pesto chicken. All right, you guys, tonight I am making a garlic chicken pizza, and I'm trying a new recipe for a creamy garlic sauce instead of a tomato sauce. I'm starting out by just making a really simple crust. I just found this recipe on Pinterest. You can use whatever crust you want, or you can buy a store-bought crust. I just made a really simple no yeast crust that I rolled out on a piece of parchment, and I actually par-baked this, meaning I partially baked it for about 7 or 8 minutes because I wanted to have a really crispy crust for this pizza, and I find that I need to bake it a little bit before I put the toppings on, or else the toppings get a little bit overdone. So I just used a really basic pizza crust recipe. You can use whatever recipe you want. I par-baked it, and so it was partially cooked already before I added all the toppings to it. To make my sauce, you start with a little bit of olive oil, and then you saute some garlic in it. I got my oil just a little bit too hot. You could see there it was splashing whenever I put the garlic in. And then you're going to make a little bit of a paste with the flour. I added 2 tablespoons of flour to the garlic and olive oil and just whisked that together over the heat until it made this kind of paste. It started to come together. After that, I added just a little bit of Italian seasoning. I didn't measure it. I just put about a teaspoon or so in there. And some cracked black pepper and salt. And then I slowly poured in, while I was whisking it together, some half and half. It calls for about 1.5 cups of half and half, and I whisked this together to keep it from scorching. And then I added some Parmesan cheese. It calls for 2 tablespoons. I just used the rest of what I had in that little container there. And I kept whisking that over the heat until my stove had settled down a little bit. And then once I popped the lid on this and let it simmer for just a couple of minutes, it thickened up really nicely. I did add a little bit of garlic salt to this because I thought it was just a little bit bland the way that I had made it, but that made it nice and flavorful. And then to assemble my pizza, I'm just going to take my crust and top it with some of this garlic sauce, and then use the shredded chicken that I had saved from the other night. I'm just going to spread that evenly over the top of the pizza. And then I used an Italian blend of cheeses. You could use whatever cheese you want. Of course, mozzarella would work just fine, but this has mozzarella and Parmesan and some others in it. And I sprinkled just a little bit of Italian seasoning on mine and then popped it into the oven. I think I baked this for about 10 minutes or so, and then I turned the broiler on high for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. You got to be careful with the broiler. But I did that just to give it some nice color on the top, and this is what it looked like. I attempted to fry some Brussels sprouts in my air fryer, and I ended up burning them, but that's okay. I was the only one who was eating them, but this was really good. It is Friday, and dinner tonight is this creamy crock-pot white chicken chili. This was basically a dump-and-go crock-pot recipe. I just put all of these ingredients in the crock-pot, some chicken breasts, some corn, some diced onions, garlic, some seasonings, 2 cans of great northern beans, which I rinsed and drained. It calls for 2 cans of diced green chilies, but I did not. I only had 1 can of diced green chilies, so I used some Rotel in addition to the 1 can that I had. Various and sundry seasonings, and then half a block of cream cheese. I cooked that on low for 8 hours, and then took the chicken out and shredded it and put it back in and added the, it calls for a 1/4 cup of half and half. I used half a cup plus 1 tablespoon of cornstarch to just kind of thicken it up a little bit. And I am eating mine with some shredded cheese and some tortilla chips, but that was a really easy recipe, so I've not tried this before. It's very similar to other soups that I make, so I'm thinking that we'll like it. I'm hoping that we'll like it because it was a really easy one to add to my soup repertoire for the fall. But that's what's for dinner tonight. Creamy crock-pot white chicken chili, and this recipe is from thechunkychef.com.